This video is brought to you by Squarespace. I've wanted to learn how to crochet for pretty much as long as I can remember. I did try at one point whenever I was a small child. My grandmother put a crochet hook in my hand, taught me a couple of stitches, and was like, all right, kid, show me what you got. I had absolutely nothing. Let me just say, 9-year-old Kira could not get the hang of it, got bored almost immediately, and my brother showed me up and did a whole lot better than I did. Ever since failing at this craft as a child who had absolutely no patience, I've been extremely intimidated about the idea of trying it again. I just have no concept of how any of it works, but I really want to try again. And since I am now an adult who probably has way too much patience for all of the tedious little crafts that I like to do, I think I might finally be ready to actually learn how to crochet. So in this video, I would like to go from absolute crochet beginner to having at least one substantial crochet project under my belt, if not multiple projects. But again, that might be setting the goalpost a little bit too far. I will go into detail about what those prospective projects might be a little bit later in the video. But right now, I actually need to start by learning the crochet basics because I don't know what it is I'm doing. And luckily for me, I have actually been working on this video for a couple of months now. I have been working on those basics since June. It is now September. Hopefully I've made some decent progress in that time. So to show you what that journey has been like, let's check in with past Kira. Hello there. I have acquired goods. Would you like a tour of my goods? Initial reaction. Some of you guys are gonna be like, wow, that's a lot of yarn considering this is like your first crochet project and you really don't know what you're doing yet. Which I mean, fair. The other thing that I've purchased. I got some canvas for some rug tufting because I've also wanted to make a moss rug for absolutely forever. So I'm thinking any leftover yarn that I have is just gonna go into a moss rug anyway. So that's the reason for all of this that's happening. I also got myself like a really basic combination of crochet hooks. I'm hoping I have my bases covered. Now that I have all of my materials, I've been watching tons and tons of tutorials going into this. I've basically spent a week just watching tutorials and preparing in the background before I even attempt anything because, again, intimidated, I don't know what I'm doing. So I think to start out, I am going to attempt just a single color granny square at first, with the hope that eventually as I practice doing a couple of different granny squares, I can at the end use it to make like a little bag. I haven't decided yet. I like the idea that I can have, you know, boring granny squares to start out with, and then eventually get more interesting and then make them into something. Oh, I am so very nervous, but let's give this a shot. Of course, to make a granny square, you've got to know the most basics of the basics. So I started out by learning how to make a slip stitch. I learned how to chain, which was very awkward at first. And then I started actually trying to work stitches to make a granny square, which was bamboozling me almost immediately. I don't know if I'm doing this right so far, guys. I'm trying my best. After a couple more minutes of following that tutorial, I decided I wasn't quite ready for that. This is really where I'm getting lost here because I don't know how many I'm supposed to have of these double crochets. I don't know what I'm doing. Instead, I decided to just focus on practicing some super basic stitches following along with Tony Lipsy's Skillshare class. Kira was trying to work her coasters of alternating double crochet and single crochet, and even that was bamboozling me. Alright, here's the first real bit that I have crocheted, and yep, that's about what I expected. Not looking too great. I think the main thing I'm struggling with so far is just trying to maintain consistent tension. I mean, obviously. This is from the Skillshare tutorial, and I think that trying to combine a single crochet and double crochet is like maybe just a little bit too big brain for me trying to start out. I think I'm going to try another one, just a single crochet. Try to do a couple of rows of that so I can like get the hang of that, then do the same for a double crochet before I try and start combining them because again, too big brain. Did practice those single crochets but pulled them out because I hate how they looked, and I continued with that same yarn practicing my double crochets, which I think were a lot more successful for some reason. And with a little bit more confidence in my double crochets, I started that granny square tutorial over again and was a lot more successful this time. make sure this wasn't just a fluke, I did yet another granny square, this time trying to focus a little bit more on making it cleaner, a little bit more of a square shape. I tried to have more consistent tension, and I also followed a different tutorial this time, just to see what would happen. And by the end, I think my second attempt did look a little bit cleaner. Finally, I had been at this all afternoon, but I hadn't had enough for some reason. I wanted to do a quick fun project just for myself. So I decided to follow this strawberry crochet tutorial by Viv Crochets on YouTube. And I definitely felt a little bit out of my element here. There's more techniques involved in this than just a simple granny square. But thankfully this was a very helpful tutorial, so I think this project went pretty smoothly. I was able to figure out the magic circle base for these. I figured out what chain to work my stitches into for the leaves, which look a little wonky, but overall pretty cute. By far the hardest part was, of course, the strawberries themselves. At this point, I had definitely not wrapped my head around the concept of increasing and decreasing in order to create like a sphere shape, and I definitely was not doing a good enough job of counting my stitches here either. But I was stubborn and determined and frankly a little bit hungry, so I powered through as best as I could, and eventually I figured something out that generally had a strawberry-esque shape. They're just some little GMO strawberries, that's all. Hello, so day 2 of crocheting practice. I feel like I've made a little bit of progress. This is what we're working with so far, just a lot of granny squares going on. These are the first 2 that I did the other day, and then I did this one to attempt a color change, and then this one just to try to work on speed a little bit. I think this took me like maybe half an hour, which wasn't too bad. And then I also just did a square of practicing my double crochet stitches, which I think they're getting a good bit more consistent, so I'm very happy about that. As happy as I am with that progress for just 2 days of crochet practice, I did also attempt to make one of these cute water bottle holders the other night, and I got barely into the base of it, and my tension was so terrible that the bottom was just curling up. I did just unweave that and scrap it. I was feeling a little defeated at this point. So basically right now I feel like I need to conquer another accessible project that I can do and not give up on and not get super like bamboozled and confused by. But thankfully that aforementioned water bottle holder would become my first project, because it turns out my problem was I was using weight 3 yarn instead of weight 4 yarn, and that's why it was looking so bad. So I just acquired the correct yarn, attempted the project again, and it turned out pretty cute this time. And this is, of course, where my strawberries found their home at the end of the day. Here I continued yapping about all of the projects that I wanted to attempt, which included a bag probably, and this crop top, which failed miserably because again I was using the wrong yarn. But it turns out water bottle holders and granny squares are pretty much all I would crochet for the next 2 months. After I made one for myself, I decided to make a water bottle holder for my mom because she is a hydrated queen, and I figured she needed a way to carry the giant water bottle that she lugs around with her. For this one I used lavender yarn and added some daisies, and I think it turned out really cute. I also made some for my partner out of some green yarn, and let us have a moment for this outfit. I am so proud of this fashion. Anyways, I think this one probably turned out the cleanest of the 3. You can tell I'm getting a lot more consistent here, but I still was not done with water bottle holders. Right now I'm working on 2 for the rest of the members of my D&D party, and I really should finish those up. I've actually been doing a lot of crochet during D&D sessions. It's the main place that I've had time to crochet while I work on all of the other projects for my channel during the last couple of months. So other than water bottle holders, I have mostly done just a bunch of different granny squares, which doesn't feel that substantial, but they have at least introduced me to a lot of different techniques and stitches that I kind of need to know to make anything interesting. Man, the constant presence of this shape in this video really reminds me of this video sponsor Squarespace. A bunch of you told me that I missed the opportunity to make that joke in my recent patchwork video, so There's the joke. That's for you guys. Squarespace really allows me to do whatever I want with my website and really gives me a lot of freedom in how I share my work. And they make it really easy, which I am also a big fan of. You can start out by choosing from dozens of professionally designed, customizable website templates that are tailored to whatever niche you're in. And then you can choose whatever text, colors, and website graphics you want. And from there, go as in-depth with the customization as your heart desires with their drag and drop website builder, Fluid Engine. I use this customization to build myself character profiles, portfolios to detail specific projects, and even make individual galleries for all of the different art niches that I do. And I suspect I will make a dedicated gallery for crochet very soon. And keeping these galleries continuously updated is also super easy with tools like automatic image scaling, which scale and arrange my pieces for me with the click of a button. But Squarespace isn't just pretty, they also have lots of functional tools like SEO tools to help your site show up in search results to the people who are actually looking for you, analytics on every aspect of your website, and analytics for your online store, because Squarespace also has a robust e-commerce platform that accommodates a huge range of sellers no matter what you sell, whether it's physical goods, digital media, services, even exclusive memberships. And they even accommodate those who sell in person with a Square Reader by keeping your inventory and all of your details consistent throughout your sales. So if you are also greedy and want all the customization and how you share your work online, you could head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, you can head to squarespace.com/pricklyalpaca to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much as always to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's endeavor. Now back to the project. So it's been a while. I think I started working on this crochet video in like June. In that time, I have not completed a significant amount of crochet projects. Some of the ones I talked about wanting to attempt, I started and then they just didn't go well. Others I did, just pretty much entirely off camera. That was kind of the point here. I kind of wanted to spend a couple months really learning the basics before I actually dive into anything that I want to make good. And I have been doing pretty much exactly that. So to actually get the show on the road, I want to make some very classic autumn crochet projects. This was kind of my plan all along. I am a cold girly. I'm a little cold right now, and it's only about 75 degrees out. I want some warm things to put on my body this winter, and I think crochet is the perfect way for me to achieve that, because then that also means I get to customize them as much as I want. I'm very excited by that prospect. So what projects do I actually want to try and accomplish? As usual, they're probably a little bit too ambitious for one video. First of all, I want to make another cute little hair scarf bandana thing. I get asked all the time if I made the Death's Head Hawk Moth one that I wear all the time on this channel. The answer is no. My friend Ellie made that one for me, but I practically live in it. It's my favorite thing to throw on, and my hair's just like not really doing it for me that day. And that happens on quite a few days, more than I would like. I would like another one in my wardrobe for some variety. Tracking on that same logic to a less attainable place, I want to see if I can make a granny square cardigan. I just see them all over Pinterest and they are so cute and they look very comfortable, and once again, I am a cold person and I like something that I can just throw on, especially whenever I'm like sewing in my basement. But for the theme, thinking I go a little bit more celestial, because some of the ones I've seen are absolutely to die for. And finally, for the least attainable project, I cannot let go of the idea of making an actual crochet crop top. This project concept has tried to kick my keister too many times, and I'm coming for it. Okay, it's made me mad, and now my crafter's audacity is really making me want to actually make a good one. For my first real project, I really want to focus on my pumpkin bandana. I've already done a couple of these using the pumpkin granny square pattern that I'm gonna probably use for this bandana. It makes a little bit of a smaller, daintier pumpkin, but I really like the shape that's going on, and it also works up pretty quick. So I think I'm going to use this pattern for my pumpkin squares. But then I also do need to figure out how to do a granny square triangle, or like the half granny squares. I'm just gonna kind of start going and figure it out. So for this pattern, I'm going to need 3 full pumpkin granny squares and then 3 half granny squares to kind of make up the big triangle. So to save myself some annoyance, I'm just gonna work up all of the pumpkin applique first and then crochet around those at once to form my granny squares. Once I had crocheted a forest green border around my first pumpkin applique, I followed the same process with the other two applique, but this time with more of a warm-toned olive green border to create a little bit more contrast. And once those were all complete, it was time to figure out the half granny squares, which I had never done before at this point. I didn't know exactly how to go about doing that, but I looked up a pattern and it was not too difficult to wrap my head around. A lot of the process is exactly the same as a typical granny square. The main thing that differs is just the center and then the two corners. After a little bit of an awkward first triangle, I grabbed my green yarn again and followed the same process to make the other two half granny squares. And I kind of messed up my color scheme here a little bit, but I had a cat visitor to distract me, so I didn't care too much about messing up. You really like my tripod, don't you? Good boy! I had a little solution in mind anyways to give it more contrast and kind of restore the effect that I was going for. I decided I would try adding a stripe to each of the squares using a technique called surface crochet, which is exactly what it sounds like. The kind I'm using just uses a slip stitch on the surface and it kind of functions like crochet embroidery. It's pretty fun. I could foresee this being very versatile for me in the future. I definitely want to get into it a little bit more, but I kept this really simple with just a little contrasting border on all of these, and I do really like the effect of it. I think it turned out looking really cute. Once all of that was done, the last step of the evening was adding an outer border to all of my squares, and I just did this with single crochet around the outside. I definitely think it makes the squares look a little bit more fallish and pumpkin spicy, and speaking of pumpkin spice, look at this little guy. He decided to park it on my lap while I was working on this, and even whenever I was done, I did not have the heart to get up. I need to get up to do some stuff for my project, but I mean, how can I? Bro is straight up asleep right now. He's so sweet. Oh, did I wake you up? I'm sorry, bud. You want to give us some purrs? HD purrs. So before I do anything else with these guys, I am gonna be a good little crocheter and block them real quick. And I'm just gonna do this with a little bit of steam. And I'm just gonna do this with an old cosplay foam sheet that I have and some sewing pins, because that is also what I have on hand. And I will also block this again whenever it's completely finished so that it actually looks nice. Okay, my bandana has now dried overnight and it should be ready to get assembled. So let's see exactly how square these dried. I kind of get the hype for blocking. That's sort of beautiful. Hold on. That has a really nice shape to it. Much better than it did whenever I had just crocheted it. So now I need to just attach it together. And I'm going to assemble these pieces with some thrifted yarn. Once in a while, someone will donate like their entire yarn stash to my local thrift store, and you can find a lot of good stuff there. A lot of things that are like completely unused. I picked, I think, both of these packages up for a combined like under $6 or something like that. So I decided to use this yarn because I think it makes for good contrast with my hair and also with my project. And I'm not gonna do anything crazy. I'm just gonna try to join them with the slip stitch method because that seems like it's about as much as my brain wants to handle right now. So I was initially pretty intimidated by all of the tutorials for joining techniques that I was seeing, and even though this did look the easiest, I figured it would just take absolutely forever. Hand stitching with sewing, I know, takes a really long time. I just had no idea what I was getting myself into with this, but once I kind of got the hang of the stitch and the flow of it and everything, it actually ended up going by pretty quickly, faster than I thought it would at least. I was also pretty fond of my yarn choice for this and just the overall three-dimensional look that it gave. I definitely want to try an invisible join at some point, but for like just really basic baby stuff, I think this stitch really did the trick. Once my squares were all connected together, I created some long chains to act as the ties for my bandana, and I attached those on, also adding a little single crochet border to the front of my bandana, and that is when I kind of realized I had a pretty big problem with this. I definitely made this just a little bit too big. Like, it's not egregious, it's not like so bad looking that it's comical, but it's not exactly what I'm going for, and if I leave it this big, I don't really think I'm gonna wear it all that often as a hair scarf. I should have paid more attention to that. However, this look kind of cute if I just wear it like this instead. Kind of just turn it into a cropped halter top situation, add a little bit more to the bottom, add a little bit more to the top, and then I should have something that's basically wearable as a cute little crochet crop top. And I wanted to make one of those in this video anyways, and honestly I'm running out of time a little bit, so this would kind of solve that problem too. So I followed that plan to rework this as a crop top. First I added a line of single crochet with that beige yarn across the top. I crocheted 2 long chains for the halter area and attached those to the top, which looked like this, and it looks like this on. Next I decided to lengthen it a little bit, so I added a line of double crochets with the orange yarn to the very bottom of it, and I liked how that looked a lot, so I continued that border around the entire thing. After some additional brainstorming, I decided I wanted to add a little bit more detail to the neckline area, so I added this little gradually increasing mesh. I liked how it was coming out, so I decided to add it to both sides, and I think it's definitely starting to make it look a little bit more like a crop top. I added a little bit more detail to the border of that to kind of finish it off, and at this point my son was back, so it's time to give obligatory pets. I considered adding a scalloped edge to the bottom, but I didn't really like it, so I ended up frogging that. So instead I just finished it off with a single crochet border to add more color contrast, and I liked how that came out. Finally, it was definitely still pretty shriveled, so I was a good little crocheter and I gave it a final blocking job and just set it on a mat to dry flat for a couple of hours. And at this point, I don't even know what this looks like on, so we'll both have to wait for the reveal. Okay, bandana, take 2, the actual one. So since I've already done a pumpkin themed item in this video, I'm not gonna try to redo the pumpkin bandana at this point. I think I might just do that project later on my own time. I know what I did wrong, my crochet hook was too big and I should have measured, it's fine. I like how the crop top came out and we're just gonna call that a happy accident. So for my actual project, I think I'm gonna try and make an Atlas moth bandana because I love an Atlas moth, it's one of my favorites, and I think that I can get it to work up very similar to the death moth one that I have. Again, this was made by my lovely friend Ellie. I did not make this one. It's just like a big half granny square, and yeah, it's got a little repair there that I need to make. I'm gonna see if I can do that too. So this should work up relatively quickly, and more importantly, I think that the method of making this in like a half granny square will also be really good for trying to match some of the patterns on the Atlas moth. I think for this one, I'm just gonna get going and kind of see what works, and then I will share with you guys what I'm doing, just in case this comes out good and anyone else wants to make it. So I think first I'm gonna start out with a little star applique, but I'm gonna do a 4-pointed star with a 5-pointed star method and just not have a point at the top, so that can be flat against the edge of the bandana. I think that will work and get me kind of the general shape that I'm trying to start out with. So I completely winged this thing. Moth joke. Which means I barely remember the process and I went into a crochet trance while making the entire thing. Why didn't anyone warn me about the crochet trance? So my initial plan of making the star applique without the top point was more or less successful. Once I had my decapitated gingerbread man, I took this orange yarn and basically followed a typical pattern that you would use to make a circle around a star applique. It's the same one used for the star applique granny square, and it gets me a little bit closer to the kind of geometry I need for a bandana. I then took some of this beige yarn because again I am trying to mimic that Atlas moth pattern, and I just did a line of single crochets around the border of my orange, and then took some orange again and did an incremental mix of treble crochets, double crochets, half double crochets, single crochets, and slip stitches in order to get closer to a triangular shape. Can you tell this month has driven me somewhat mad? At this point we're looking a little too yeehaw, so then I switched back to a burnt orange yarn, and I basically did an alternating pattern of double crochet clusters and skip stitches in order to kind of begin forming that granny square look. I then repeated that infinite granny square pattern once again, this time adding 4 white double crochet clusters to match the spots on the wings. I then added a line of brown using that same pattern, and since some of these markings were a little difficult to achieve the way I was doing things, I decided to try and utilize surface crochet once again to get some of those more delicate markings. This is once again a super freeform process, and I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just using the chain method. That's the only one I know of. I added some brown markings to outline the body of the moth, some white markings, and since I freehanded this, it's difficult to explain any kind of pattern, but just follow your heart. Next, I took this burgundy yarn and added another granny square layer to the outer edge of my moth, and also added a little head to give him more shape. And then I did another line of orange, and then finally I took this yellow and added a small scalloped edge to everything to finish off the border. I did this with 3 double crochets to make it a little daintier instead of the usual 5. I then made some ties with this bulky beige yarn in chains of 52, I believe. I single crocheted across the entire top to attach it. I did a few more surface crochet markings off camera, and after all that, my bandana was looking pretty good for just about 2 hours of work. So then I took it inside to block it with, once again, a little bit of steam from my iron. I set it down flat to fully dry, and you'll have to see what this looks like on later in the reveal. At last, we have come to the main course of this video, the cardigan. So I have been working on and off on the cardigan for several weeks now because it just takes a while to make a cardigan. I'm still very much a beginner, and I also am not very fast at doing granny squares that have designs in them. And I want this cardigan to be a mix of granny squares that are kind of just the basic standard infinity granny square and granny squares that do have designs like celestial themes, that sort of thing. So it's taken a little bit of time for me to figure out how to do the ones with designs in them because, you know, learning curve and everything. But to update you a little bit on what that whole journey has been like, here is past Kira. The foundation of this cardigan is really those celestial granny squares that I made during the learning phase of all this. They are really fun to make, and I absolutely fell in love with the patterns. And since I had already made a few with this theme, I figured I would just keep going until I had an entire cardigan. I had a giant selection of yarn to use for all of this because I kind of fell into the early crocheters trap of just buying way too much. But I also needed a lot of variety for the vibes that I was going for, so I don't really regret this at all. My main strategy for making a huge cardigan without regretting my life decisions was just making really big granny squares. So I started by adding a thick double crochet border to the granny squares I had already completed with this bulky dream spun yarn. I also used like a 9mm hook. This set the general size I wanted to work in and also established the aesthetic pretty well. So from there, I just kept on making celestial granny squares using a bunch of different patterns and techniques and colors. The range of designs was really fun to crochet and also gave me a lot more familiarity with new stitches and techniques. So I've been working on these granny squares for the cardigan for a couple of days, and this is what we have so far. I've kind of just been doing whatever I want for the designs and for like the different rows of colors and everything. I've mainly worked ahead so much because I just wasn't sure about the color scheme that I wanted or the theming or whatever. At first I was doing a little bit more like pumpkin theme, but then I started getting a little bit more inspired by like some celestial examples that I was seeing on Pinterest. And for size comparison, these are really quite big. I've been making them larger than a typical granny square so that it doesn't take me as long. And I've also been using this really colorful, bulky, soft yarn along like the outside border, so it's just gonna make it cozier in general too. So I'm thinking once I add one more row to the bottom of this, I would at least have enough for like the entire back of the cardigan. I can maybe add a little bit more if I have time, make it cozier, we'll see. But obviously that is going to take a while, so I will check back in whenever I have more progress on that. At this point, I had made pretty decent progress on the back of the cardigan, but I had not started at all on the sleeves. I wanted to keep those just a little bit more simple and mostly do standard granny squares in a smaller size. Just do like interesting colors and patterns here and there. So I had a lot of those that I needed to get through. And I was being a little ambitious with my skill level. I'm going to see how many granny squares I can crochet before I get too tired and want to go to sleep. I did like 4 in an hour earlier, which I think is pretty good. They're just regular ones, but still, I need some filler squares, so I will keep you updated on the progress.
The next day.
It turns out I could crochet 4 more before my hand pain really started getting out of hand. real right now, I'm kind of injured at the moment. Like, I don't really feel good. After my little granny square binge the other night, I still have some soreness left in my body, and I kind of knew what I was doing at the time. I sort of knew if I kept going that night, I wasn't gonna feel good. I already didn't feel good, and I am now paying the price. Now, I have put my body on rest for about 2 days now from crocheting. My hand, which hurt pretty bad the other night, now feels fine. I probably did not rest my shoulder as much as I should have. I really don't want to take a rest from crochet over the weekend. Also might be very necessary for my overall health. But I hopefully have found a way to reduce my hand pain a little bit. I purchased some real good ergonomic crochet hooks, which I now realize is something that I probably just should have invested in the first place. I know the internet goes absolutely crazy over these, so I'm excited to try them out and see if this will help my phalanges a little bit. Let's unbox these babies and see what all the fuss is about. It does feel nice. I do like the way that grip is. Not bad.
So as you might have noticed, I filmed a lot of this video out of order, so I was already using my good hooks by the time I made 2 earlier garments in this video, and I've gotta say, I have not had hand pain since switching to these hooks. They're honestly pretty fantastic. And this is not sponsored, I paid my own money dollars for these like a sucker, but just general advice, skip these hooks, get ergonomic hooks instead. Any ergonomic hooks.
So to fast forward back to the present, I feel like I'm making pretty good progress right now despite my little injury setback. It's been, I think, like 4 days since I filmed that last thing. My shoulder is feeling a lot better. I did indeed rest it, and I just finished crocheting a couple of granny squares a few minutes ago, so I am now resting it again. I'm trying to be good, I'm trying to be better. So while I'm on a break, let me show y'all how the cardigan is shaping up. So this is what I've got so far in terms of all of my squares. I'm not exactly sure on placement yet, so this is kind of just a rough idea of where I might put everything, but also I do want to change the back of this a little bit, and this is the back. I still need to complete some of the front squares. So what I'm thinking instead for the back and the whole thing is basically something like this, where I fill in these back spaces with just solid granny squares to make it just a little bit less busy. Use those completed granny squares down the front instead to save myself a little work. And then I also might want to substitute some of these with the granny squares that include a little bit more of this yarn, because the store was out of this yarn that I was doing all the borders with.
That explanation was getting a little long-winded. Thankfully, I did make a diagram for myself for what I had left. Basically, I wanted to add 1 star granny square to both sides on the front. I wanted to add neutral granny squares to the back and all of these places, and I wanted to widen the sleeves by 1 row, but make all of those granny squares stars. That way I can mix them into the sleeves in different places, just make them look a little bit more interesting.
Anyways, this is going to take me a while to figure out, and I'm also gonna tweak the design as I go, just based on what I think looks good. So I'm gonna let my shoulder rest a little while longer, and then I'm gonna do some more frantic crocheting.
I began by finishing out the sleeves. There are a couple more normal granny squares that I needed to add to those at this point, so I took care of those. And I even took it upon myself to time how quickly I can do a normal granny square now. Honestly, not too shabby. With my giant stack of normal granny squares done for the sleeves, there's 18 of those right there. It was time to work on those extra stars that I wanted to add, and as I did before, I started by just doing all of the applique first, just to streamline things. And then I crocheted a solid granny square around each of the sleeve stars, and that's it for all of the sleeve pieces. Next, I wanted to do the 2 neutral granny squares at the bottom back. I made these with a classic pattern, but with more interesting colors. Next, I crocheted 2 more star squares to fill out the 2 front panels. And then finally, for these 4 squares, I was gonna leave them more basic, but then I found this 4-pointed star pattern. So I whipped up 4 more of those applique, crocheted a magenta granny square around that, added a larger dreamy border around the entire thing, and then I finally had all the granny squares that I needed for my cardigan, mostly.
So I'm almost done with the actual making of my squares here, but I do foresee a tiny problem. I'm not entirely sure because I'm kind of just following a general pattern for this based on a couple of things that I've seen on the internet and sort of just winging it from there. I think my front squares might be a little bit smaller than I would like them to be, for this to be like very oversized and floofy and comfy. On most of the cardigans that I see, the neck hole isn't quite this big, and I am going to add a little border around the outside of this, so that's going to add a little bit more fabric to it as well, but they need maybe just a little bit more to make the front as big as the back in terms of just overall fabric volume. I don't know if that makes sense. Alright, I'm getting really indecisive here, so I have devised a little test. I have a flannel shirt that is baggy, that fits me about the way I want this to fit me. So I'm just gonna lay this down on top of my work in progress cardigan and see how the size matches up. I feel like this matches up with the back of the cardigan really well, but as you can see, the front panels I feel like need to be just a tiny bit bigger in order to get them to match up the way I want them to and have just a little extra bit on the sides to make it really cozy, really oversized. Guess another thing I could do is go ahead and attach these together and then maybe just add a line of double crochets along just one side so it doesn't end up being too big, because I'm also gonna do the border in the front. Decisions. Before I do any of that though, I once again am gonna be good and I am going to block all of these. So let's do that. In lieu of conventional blocking materials, I have an old cosplay foam playmat and a bunch of takeout chopsticks. I've heard of people doing this. We're gonna see if it works. Okay, I have my awl and I have some samples for the sizes I'm gonna need. Good. Okay, now I'm just gonna do that for all of these. And there we go. And now I just need to let these guys dry.
2 hours later.
Okay, these should all be dry at this point. It's been a couple of hours. So I think I can finally begin stitching all of these together, and I have absolutely no idea how long that's going to take. I am very, very scared of this step of the process. I've at least at this point learned the stitch that I need to actually join all of these together. It's just the timing of it all. It's a little late. I have a couple more hours tonight that I am willing to spend working on this before I need to go to bed. So I'm gonna try to stitch together as many of these as I can before that point.
Once I had the main body of the cardigan put together, I added that double crochet border along the two edges, took a sleeping break, and then came back the next morning to assemble both of the sleeves. These definitely took longer than the main body to assemble because of the sheer amount of squares, but after several hours of stitching, I finally had both of those assembled together as well. I steamed them real quick to help relax some of the crazy edges that were going on, and at this point I also started brainstorming how to do the ribbing that I wanted to add to the cuffs and hem. This is what I was talking about here, but I had neglected to plug my mic in. Anyways, I watched a bunch of tutorials on how to do this because it was bamboozling me at first, a lot of them from Tony Lipsy's channel. Anyways, I kind of settled on the idea of doing a double crochet back loop only ribbing. It felt very accessible for me because I'm probably most comfortable with a double crochet because I've done it about a bajillion times at this point. And during my D&D session that night, I started attempting to learn this ribbing, trying to work up a couple of cuffs separate from my cardigan so that I can gather the sleeves down later and attach them. Especially when using this chunky yarn, these cuffs were not too difficult to work up. They came together pretty quickly and they are not perfect, but they're really cozy and they will do just fine for this cardigan. Whenever I started adding ribbing directly to the hem of my cardigan, on the other hand, that is whenever I started running into a lot of issues. I don't think I was skipping the correct amount of stitches here or something. I made it too wide and I ended up having to pull it all out.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Hey love, you want to frog some of this? Yeah. Have at it.
The whole thing?
Yep.
At least my partner enjoyed the process of frogging this. I experienced only rage.
Alright, well, I didn't get super far doing all of this last night. I basically just got the cuffs done. Definitely think I was just a bit too tired to be trying to figure out a new technique, so I have slept now. I'm gonna give this another shot. I know I can get it, I just gotta try. So before I attempt the ribbing again, I am gonna go ahead and sew everything together because I think that will make the process go smoothly. But I have a couple of qualms with how this is coming out. I really like most of it, but I definitely made it a little bit longer than I was initially thinking. And I feel like it needs to be just a little bit wider to compensate, but I also don't know if I have a whole lot of time to do that. I'm sort of just... I think I am stubbornly probably just going to sew the sleeves on and then just do a couple more extra lines of double crochet along the edge. Just expand it along the edge there. Not expand the shoulders because all that is already long enough. That might solve a little bit of my issue. Anyways, I have a lot of sewing to do, so I'm gonna see how quickly I can get that done.
So I laid out my sleeves and got sewing. Stitching from the inside, I sewed both sleeves on, which looks like this. And then taking some of the last of my colorful chunky yarn, I did a line of treble crochets along all of those edges. Taking the same yarn that I used for the ribbed cuffs, I did a line of treble crochets around the collar to save myself a little bit of time and yarn. That expanded the front panel nicely, but it still wasn't quite wide enough for my taste, so I took some of this chunky black yarn that I had thrifted, and I once again added another line of treble crochet to the side edges. This was pretty decent, but we still weren't quite there, so I did another one. And that still wasn't enough for me, so I did a final line with some purple and orange yarn twisted together. This finally gave me the girth and tonnage that I was looking for, so I laid those pieces right sides together and sewed up both of those edges. I just used a blanket stitch here, by the way, for a little bit of added durability, and finally I was getting the oversized effect that I was going for. Next, I turned my attention to the sleeve cuffs. In order to gather them down a little bit, I did a couple of lines of decreasing double crochets to make them a more appropriate size to join to my cuffs, and I once again just hand stitched my ribbed cuffs to my cardigan sleeve with a blanket stitch. I then sewed my sleeve cuff right sides together with some yellow yarn, and I then stitched up the side seam of both of my sleeves, again doing so right sides together. This finally gave me a functional and wearable cardigan, and I absolutely love how these big chunky sleeves came out.
Alright, I am now finally on the home stretch. The last thing that I need to do is do the ribbing on the bottom side of the cardigan. It's definitely gonna take a little while, but I'm determined.
I decided to keep my ribbing determination outdoors where I could touch and smell grass and hopefully be less stressed out by this entire process. And it ended up being stressful for multiple reasons, because not only did I have to crochet a lot of ribbing, I also had one less skein of yarn than I thought I did. So I only had one more gold chunky skein of yarn to do the ribbing across the entire bottom of the cardigan, which was certainly not enough. I ended up having to do a lot of improvisation to get this to work off just one skein. It ultimately ended up looking okay, but not without some shenanigans.
Alright, so let me tell you about the shenanigans that are going on in the ribbing here, because shenanigans abound. Since I only had this one skein to work with, which I almost used all of, which is my bad, I definitely should have gotten more than I did. I had to be a little bit conservative with the actual ribbing stitches in here. So basically, I did ribbing sort of alternating with basically a treble crochet, but it's like you put 3 loops on your hook rather than 2. I'm sure there's a name for that. I kind of just improvised it because I figured it would work, and it did. So since this little stitch uses a lot less yarn than a full ribbing stitch, I kind of just alternated sets of ribbing with that all the way down, using a lot more of these in the back. You know, what the back of my cardigan looks like is none of my business. And then again, a lot more of those stitches that look nice in the front side. It kind of gets the effect that I want. It's fine. It's not winning any awards. I'm happy enough with it. Speaking of crazy improvisations, I've probably ranted a little bit about my 3D printer just not working for some reason right now. I wanted to add buttons to this, so I thought, no problem, I have a 3D printer, I can just 3D print some, and I have been trying all day to get the file to 3D print, and even though last time I printed with it, I had absolutely 0 issues whatsoever, I just keep getting a data transfer error every single time I try to print. I've gotten like 10 of them today. And my 3D printer is going crazy. I was trying to have cute buttons on this, you know, it seems like it should. And I was really attached to the idea of doing star buttons on this. I just think it would be really cute, just as a detail or even as something that is a little bit more functional. I don't feel like sculpting right now. Girl, I'm so tired. So I ran out to the dollar store just as a total shot in the dark to see if there's anything I can do. Find buttons, make a button, I don't know. After 2 separate dollar stores, I was about to walk out. I found these little guys, just some little wooden stars in varied sizes. And these are not buttons yet, but I have a power drill. So plan is I am going to drill some holes in these so that I can actually stitch them on and they can be functional buttons. I'm gonna paint them, seal them, and this is gonna have to work for now. I can always replace them later.
Anyways, after all those shenanigans were done, I set aside some time to actually weave in all of my ends, which sucked. That's why I put it off for so long, but it does look a lot better whenever you weave in the ends of your thing. And since I am a glutton for making a project needlessly over the top, I still was not done crocheting granny squares. You might notice this thing is criminally without any pockets, so I was on a mission to change that because I'm sick of my garments not having pockets. It's ridiculous. So I whipped up a couple of granny squares using some magenta and multicolored yarn in a pattern big enough to fit my phone, blocked those as quickly as I could so that they actually looked nice, and then I top stitched them both onto the side panels of my cardigan, once again using a blanket stitch, and a process that took absolutely forever. I feel like sewing with big chunky thread like this should not take this long. And with those squares fully installed and years of pocketless garments slowly getting avenged, and the last step of assembly is to stitch on all of my little star buttons, which are fully functional whenever you slot them in between the treble crochets that line the front closure. But alas, we still had one more chapter in this long, long journey. For the final blocking method of this cardigan, I decided to go for a full-on wet blocking method, something that's a little hands-off and something that won't require so much steam because there's no way my iron is penetrating this thing in any useful way. As per internet recommendation, I let my cardigan go for a swim in a bath of a little lukewarm water and some Dawn dish soap, let it soak for about 20 minutes. And when that was complete, I gently squished out some excess water by making some biscuits, making sure not to wring it out at all.
It's so heavy. It's genuinely like 15 pounds.
Okay. Oh boy, this retained so much water. Alright, let's see if we can burrito this thing.
Whenever that was complete, I took it downstairs and laid it across a couple of towels in order to burrito it in those towels and try to get out even more excess water.
There are certain cats that would probably be easier to burrito than this thing. I would be very surprised if this were dry by morning, honestly. Okay, I'm not gonna really mess around with pinning because I feel like the sheer weight of this will probably keep it in shape like I have it. I feel like this is probably going to take a really long time to dry, so I'll give an update, but I'm mostly just gonna have to wait until this dries to do a reveal or anything.
After letting this dry over the course of the entire weekend, it was still wet, so I decided to gently take it outside.
I don't know if this is gonna work well. I am mostly just getting a little desperate. I'll check in. Okay. I did eventually move to the back porch, and it's also been out here like overnight, so let's moment of truth. Mostly dry, still a little damp in a couple of places.
Finally, whenever it was still a little damp, I flipped it over and let the back side sit and dry in some direct sunlight for a little while because most of it was dry. The shape was set, it just needed a little excess help.
2 hours later.
And I just checked it, and I do believe now it is finally dry. That also means it's reveal time. and welcome to not quite the end of the video. Please don't go yet, I have more to say. So let's talk about the individual pieces that I made in this video, how they came out, and frankly how much I like them.
We're gonna once again do a wrap-up lightning round because I am just so long-winded with my outros. First up, Atlas Moth Bandana. I am really satisfied with how this came out, especially for not taking that much time. Probably took about 2 hours to throw together, give or take, and even though the surface crochet is pretty messy, I think it really pulled together the pattern, made it look a lot more like an Atlas moth than a normal half granny square pattern would. Definitely recommend making a bandana based on your favorite moth. It's really not too hard to put together. Should I do a Luna Moth one next, guys? I feel like I gotta do a Luna Moth. As for the pumpkin crop top, I'd say this is probably the item I'm least satisfied with, mostly because it was a total accident and I didn't really intend to make one of these. I don't think this particular cut of crop top is the most flattering on me, unfortunately. It's a little big and awkward in a couple of places, and I also had to wear it with a bra in the reveal because, again, wasn't intending to make one of these, and my weave was pretty open.
Crocheters in the comments, I am officially soliciting your help to make this more wearable because I don't like wearing it with a bra. None of my bras fit the cut and it looks awkward. Something is underneath my porch.
I don't know, I like it, but I feel like it might need a little work. I almost feel like adding some bell sleeves or something might make it a lot cuter. I definitely think I would wear it for like Oktoberfest or something like that, but I would definitely love some feedback on how to make this something that I reach for more often in my closet. Finally, the Celestial Cardigan. I am so happy with how this came out. I honestly did not expect it to come out this good. I expected it to be a little mid. I definitely had to trust the process a lot in the middle of construction, but I'm really obsessed with the result. I can't wait for it to actually get cold enough for me to wear it. Definitely gonna be like my main around the house coat in the winter, and I'm so glad I made it long enough because it styles really well with my going out fashion sense too. The Willow Rosenberg core of it is off the charts.
But I'm still not done. Let's talk about the journey overall. My experience learning to crochet.
This is mostly advice for anyone else looking to conquer their crochet fear and get into the craft. First up, buy ergonomic hooks to begin with, and make sure you have a decent understanding of yarn weight and how it works before you buy a lot of yarn. Next, if you have the patience for it, I definitely think granny squares are the best place to start. I know this is very duh advice, but they will definitely teach you a lot, and with all of the different varieties and shapes, you won't get bored too quickly as long as you don't mind assembling those in order to make like a patchwork style thing later. I also recommend starting with super quick and easy projects like granny squares, water bottle holders, and bandanas to boost your confidence a lot early on. Once you get past the initial video tutorial phase, learn how to read pattern abbreviations for written patterns and pattern diagrams as quickly as possible. This will save you a lot of time because going through a video tutorial for every single stitch kind of takes forever. If money is an issue or you just want to be a little bit more sustainable, look for secondhand hooks and yarn at estate sales and thrift stores, and definitely don't crochet so much that you develop a deltoid injury because it's been literal weeks and my shoulder still hurts. Anyways, I would love some cool suggestions of crochet projects for me to make in the future. I'm definitely sticking with this craft because I have plans for this. So many of the whimsical garments that I've designed would just be better in crochet form. And definitely subscribe if you want to see more of this because I already have a really cool project planned.
You made it to the end of this very long video, which there's no doubt that this is just so long. My God. I'm so glad that you were here. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got like a little dash of fall spooky content with this, even though it was kind of like spooky light. My next video should be diving just right into the literal spookiness of it all. And yes, I am already a little bit behind on my big Halloween project. Thank you so much for asking. Like the video and tell it it's pretty. Subscribe if you want for more spooky content. That's definitely coming. Once again, thank you so much for watching, especially if you watched till the end of the video. But as always, the biggest thank you for every single one of my videos goes to my patrons, and especially my executive producers who have been watching me suffer through all of this, and you could do that too if you want to join. Link will be in the description. Anyways.
Cindrus, Speak of the Devil, Tiro2, Donna Shipley, Mystic, Danielle Bergner, Scribble, Jazz the Bat, Mushroom Sita, Ghastly, Galaxy Stardust 035, Luxabar, My Name is A, Becca, Nylode Nam, Cyrus Orion, Jenny Craftsma, I Do TKD, Ren, Bantoff the Yellow, Cloud Max, Villy Smelly, Stabby Horse, Heebie Jeebies, Cardia X, Christina Cantia Art, Fiasco, Mossy Raven, Silver, To Prism, I'm not saying that name on the internet, ABW Makes, Ice Cavan, A1 Hindu, Liana, Ermler Jean, Phoenix PNG Not Found, Freedom and Gus Gus, Dodo, Zyle S, Agent Sketchy, Thea Maia, Lovisa, Eloquent Silence, Sushi McNushi, Hypnos, Katie, Sweet Winter Garden, Gravity Drop, I Hang Out with Cats at Parties, and Bean the Bread.